So you're looking at moving to Mexico, and a couple places you might consider are Playa del Carmen, Cancun, or Cozumel. So let's compare those three places right now. Let's start with Cancun. It's probably the most famous place that we're listing in this video. And Cancun, obviously, in that case, is super touristy. There's a ton of hotels there, there's a lot of resorts, and there's a lot of amenities to be found. It's probably the easiest place to find hospitals, to find dentists, English-speaking hospitals and dentists and things like that. So if you're looking for something that feels a little bit more like home, maybe Cancun will be the best place for you in this comparison. Now, it would be easy to live right in the city center of Cancun, of course, but I've also found that on the outskirts of the town, there's also a lot of condos and apartment buildings and things like that are really open to foreigners, and they'll have a lot of good amenities like pools and playgrounds and gyms and things like that. And then it's not difficult to get around while living in a place like that either. Of course, there's taxis like Didi and Uber, or just the taxis driving around, but there's also a lot of moto taxis that are basically like converted motorcycles. You might call them tuk-tuks. And those are really easy to get around and very inexpensive. Now, while living in Cancun, you'll find that some of the taxi drivers are actually a little bit grumpy. That's probably just because of the feel of the city. It's a big city. I always feel like taxi drivers are a little bit more grumpy there. Uber is still banned in Cancun right now, but you can use Didi. Now, I'll link down to that in the description box. You can use that to call a taxi from anywhere in Cancun. And I found it costs no more than about $5 to get from one end to Cancun to the other end. It could be like a 20 to 25 minute drive basically, and it's around 100 pesos. Now, if you want to live in Cancun, it's definitely going to have the most shops, the most restaurants, the most amenities. So if you're looking for all that stuff, this is the best place to live on this list. It's also probably the best place to live in terms of the quality of beaches. I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the water there. There's also just a lot of separate beaches there. Some of them are very touristy, where you can go get the big Cancun sign. Some of them are a little bit more local and much more quiet. Some of them you can see dolphins on the regular. So there's a lot of different options in Cancun for some really, really nice beaches. One thing I noticed while living in Cancun was that there's not a lot of jungle or nature integrated into the city. It's pretty much all concrete. Now, that can be different compared to some other places that we're talking about later in this video. If you do want a little bit of nature, though, you could always just hop on a boat over to Isla Mujeres. I think it was like a 15 or 20 minute boat ride. It wasn't very expensive, and Isla is quite popular for day trips or even staying over for an extra night. They got some really nice beaches there. It's easy to get a golf cart or a motorcycle and just go drive around and explore the island and go see some places that are a little bit outside of like the city feel. Now, if you want to live in Cancun, I found that you could live in an Airbnb there for less than $250 a month, which is going to be the least expensive that you can find between the places we're comparing on this list. So in terms of money, Cancun's going to be the best place to save your cash on rent. Now, what if you want to buy? There's some really nice places that you can buy out there. Between $30,000 and $50,000, you could find a really high quality condo in a secure lot with the pools, the playgrounds, everything you need. And lastly, living in Cancun might be easier than living in Playa del Carmen or Cozumel, just because there is the international airport right here, and it's really easy to just get on a flight and be back home within 2 to 4 hours. Very simple. Now let's move south to Playa del Carmen, and I think the major thing about living in Playa del Carmen is how thankful I am when you poke that like button so more people can see this video. I really appreciate it. Now, Playa del Carmen isn't quite as touristy as Cancun, but it still is touristy. It's just a little bit less intense there. Now, there's still a lot of access to taxis, but you're not going to find Uber or Didi in Playa. They've gotten rid of that. But however, there is some secret WhatsApp groups where you can text over to a taxi station and they will send a taxi to you. You just have to find those. I might even link down below to a number that I have for a WhatsApp group for that. Now, Playa del Carmen is quite a bit smaller than Cancun, but it still has a lot of the same living options. You could live in the city center where you can just walk to everything, or it's really easy to find some condos and things like that on the outskirts for rent. And they're really, really nice places. They remind me of little, hip sections of Barcelona or something like that. So some really cool places to live in Playa, I think. Playa del Carmen does have like a party lifestyle to it. There's a ton of young people there who love to go out and do their thing. It's close to Tulum as well, which is a little more bohemian, but still very much party-centric. But it's also, Playa del Carmen is a good place to work remotely. And a lot of digital nomads live there. And that's because the infrastructure is really good. Like I said, there's some good places to live, but also the internet's fast, and it's just really easy to walk around and find a cafe to go and sit down and get free Wi-Fi as well. Now, as opposed to Cancun, I would say that Playa del Carmen just doesn't have the beaches that are quite as beautiful. Now, there are some nice beaches there, the water's nice or whatever, but compared to Cancun, the beaches here are small, they're crowded, and just not as nice as Cancun. Not even close, actually. However, on the other hand, there is a lot more nature and jungle integrated into the city. So if you're walking around, there's a lot more trees, you're going to see a lot more wildlife. For me, it's a lot more relaxing than living in Cancun just for that reason. And I mentioned that you have access to places like Tulum, but there's also a lot of cenotes around. Those are like underground freshwater caves that you can go down into. But also there's easy access to Cozumel if you just want to have an island day. It can be from like a 25 to 1 hour boat ride depending on the boat. And it's really easy to get there and back and just enjoy a day, but still be living in Playa del Carmen. Now, the cost of an Airbnb in Playa del Carmen is going to be a little bit more expensive than in Cancun. I found the cheapest to be a little bit just under $300. Again, you could also buy another condo in Playa del Carmen. They're going to be more about $40,000 to $50,000 as opposed to that $30,000 range you can find in Cancun. Now, granted, you still are pretty close to the airport as well, maybe an hour or so, but it's not as easy to get to the airport as if you're living in Cancun. But being in Playa, you are still really close to that international travel hub, and it's still easy to get home. Lastly, Cozumel. That's where I'm at right now. I love it here. You know, it's touristy, but much less so. The touristy area is basically just right off the boat. There's a square right there. There's a few blocks that have a lot of touristy stuff, but once you get, 5, 6, 7 blocks outside of where the boat disembarks, then you're going to find that it's a much more local place to live, and I really enjoy that. That's because it's much slower pace. The roads are slower. The taxis seem calmer. There's not any moto taxis here. There's no Didi. There's no Uber or anything like that. So it just gives a different feel in terms of transportation. But there's also a lot more nature integrated to the city here. I really appreciate that. It makes me feel a little bit more at peace in Cozumel here than what I felt in Playa or in Cancun. And even if you're in the city center of Cozumel, it's really easy to go explore the rest of the island. You could either, rent a car or get a motorcycle or something like that. And the island is actually quite large, and most of the development is on the western side of the island. So once you go over to the eastern side, they call it the wild side. There's not a lot of development there. There's waves coming in that you can surf, as opposed to the western side, which is much more calm, like you would expect of the Caribbean. A better place to snorkel probably. But on that eastern side, there's a lot of jungle out there, a lot of places that you can go where you can get totally outside of any kind of buildings or concrete and just see nothing but nature. And that's what I really love about about Cozumel. I also feel like living in Cozumel just feels a little bit safer than in Cancun or Playa. And maybe that's because it's smaller, but also there's a pretty heavy military presence here. Now, it is going to be a little bit more expensive here. If you're staying in Airbnb, you're not going to find a place for much less than $400 a month. And if you want to buy here, it's going to be a lot more expensive. A small house is going to be at least about $75,000. You're looking more at closer to $100,000. If you start looking at the condos, they get, a couple $100,000, so much more expensive than if you want to buy something in Playa del Carmen or Cancun. That being said, there is an airport on the island, and while it's not like an international hub, it can fly you to Cancun or it can fly you to Playa, and then you can easily get from Playa to Cancun and get back to the international hub. So there is a small airport here, but it's not the easiest place to get back home as compared to Cancun or Playa. So where should you live in Mexico between Cancun, Playa, or Cozumel? Well, real quick, Cancun is good for travel and cost of living. It's good for the Western amenities and the beaches, but it's not the calmest place to live. Playa del Carmen, I would say, is really good for networking, for digital nomads, for a relaxed lifestyle that still lets you work hard, and it's a slightly more expensive than Cancun. Lastly, Cozumel would be really good for the nature lovers, especially if you have a vehicle, and it is more expensive than Playa or Cancun, and it's a little bit more difficult to find the inexpensive places to eat, but they're still possible to find, and it's still a great place to live. So let me know down in the comments where you would live between these 3 places, and if you want to learn how to move to Mexico, 3 easy ways, just click this video right here.